I grew up in a very religious second-generation Mexican house, and so there was a whole layer of obedience to elders. You know, respeto meant not questioning anyone, meant complete respect and cooperation and so on, even if things seemed kind of like difficult or unusual. So there was that. There was a whole layer of maybe conflict about what it meant to be Chicano, growing up not in a mainstream dominant culture home, living then in a world that was very much different than what I grew up in. And I had a lot of negative images as well growing up. So there was religion as well, that we were very, very identified with church and serving gods, being good, even considering priesthood. So religion, call it a culture of poverty, Latino family background, all that was really important for me actually to have less of a voice and less an ability to question and to challenge authority. We only learned, I think, by example. And so I think I had a violent alcoholic father, so my male model was someone who didn't have good coping skills, never talked about sexuality and sexual development. And so what I relied on was what I saw on TV, this hyper-masculine kind of identity, hypersexual, even if that was all confusing to me and we didn't really have a language for all that. So I did grow up with a lot of expectations about being a protector for others, about being strong, never being weak, never asking for help, always being someone who was going to take care of other people, which also set me up for not being able to ask for help, not be able to acknowledge my own experience, or even have a language for it. Growing up in poverty, poverty is a kind of violence, and we had violence in our home. So we were terrified a lot of times at the physical abuse that was going on. I witnessed my mom being beaten, her life being threatened at different points. Alcoholism had a huge impact on our communication and how we could acknowledge things in our own family. We were very ashamed of all the poverty, and so I had secondhand clothes, we were hungry most of the time, and so we silenced and suppressed a lot so that we would never kind of give a bad image publicly about our family. So all those things added up. Plus, in my case, I tried so hard to be the perfect kid and perfect student, so I was basically practically abandoned and looked for ways to get attention from others. So all those things were a part of my later experience of abuse. What happened growing up was, I really wanted out of my house, out of my neighborhood, to a place that was safe, a place where I could be taken care of, and that was the church. I started working in a rectory. My mom was best friend of the pastor, who was a high-ranking person in the diocese that I grew up in. He was actually the founder of this religious ed conference and groomed me to be a priest, and I had a vocation. And so it was this complete obedience and this really great experience of being able to eat and be in a quiet place where I could study and actually work and get paid. And so all that was a setup, all that was a grooming process for my family, for me individually, which led to then giving me alcohol, which led to more attention, to special trips, which all kind of eventually came to sexual abuse, not just by him, but by an employee, a friend of his. And all that was then silenced. And it was like a bad dream. I had no language to talk about sexuality, no language to talk about asking for help, to understand that experience. So at a very early age, I dissociated, I split from that. Clergy or religious authority, sexual abuse is a very powerful form of betrayal. And it's different from other types of abuse, even historical abuse or things that happen suddenly to people, because a lot of times it's a shared experience and a lot of people know about that and can offer some kind of support. Clergy or religious authority sexual abuse is more like incest, actually, because the person's not just dealing with one person, person is actually dealing with a whole system, a whole group of people who believe so strongly and need to believe, usually in the perpetrator, that they will deny and betray the person who's been abused. And so in that way it's similar. Difference with incest and religious authority sexual abuse is this is God's representative. And in my experience, my family were so identified with the church. And for me, my life was so unhappy that I saw, church and being a part of the religious tradition as a way out, as kind of redemption. And so when the redemption is part of the torment, is a part of the trauma, what happens eventually is what I and a lot of people call soul death. And I know that's not unique to religious authority sexual abuse, but it does have that deep layer of this is God's part, this is God's action in some way, and now I've got nowhere to go. I grew up kind of abandoned. I was abused sexually and dissociated from that and just wrapped in a deep shame. And that then became something that I internalized at a very young age. And so I was a real good student. I was real competitive in sports, and those things were rewarded. I mean, people were very proud of me, and that fed my sense of worth, because I had a deep sense of being worth less and help less and power less. And so I became a hyper achiever. So I guess I would want people to know that it's not just people who are missing school or who are acting out in self-destructive ways. I did that later, but what drove me to overachieve was that deep sense of shame. So I would just say, know that more people are carrying more things than probably imagine. I think I was depressed most of my life and covered it by activity, by, in college, basically, when I left home, I numbed. And so I did what a lot of people did in college and drank and smoked and experimented with drugs and did whatever extreme experiences I could. But as an adult, I turned that into being more productive, working really hard, getting more and more degrees, all of that time, never really being happy, never really being satisfied with that. And so as an adult, I kept very, very busy. And as I had been abandoned, abused, and ashamed as a child and internalized that, I realized that I interacted with others in that way. I mean, I certainly abandoned myself, certainly was abusive and overworking and so on to myself, and ashamed. Nothing was ever good enough. And then I think I was especially difficult with peers and with others. And so intimacy and vulnerability and an ability just actually to be connected to my own experience were all very, very disconnected. But it was a long time. It was 30 years before those memories surfaced. And I think they came at a time when I was professionally very intact. I mean, I had completed my doctoral work. I was a professor. My life was real solid. I had long-standing marriage and great kids. And so everything was great, actually. And then in 2002, when the Boston clergy abuse news was being reported, I was actually on the East Coast in a conference for faculty at Catholic universities, and I was working in a Catholic university. And all of these things then began to surface. And so I began to deal with it when I saw that being reported, when it was made public in other people's experience. And then when I returned home, actually saw one of my sons, who was about 12, 13 years old at the time, same age that I was when I was abused, laying on my bed with his shirt off, and all of a sudden that flashed and the floodgates opened. So it was a long time before I think I was safe enough and had enough support in other ways that this could all come up. There have been several things that have been really important. I was a part of a men's group for many years before all this stuff came up. And so having that peer support, and in particular that group of men, and we shared, it wasn't a social club, we shared our brokenness and our struggles, and it was a real major life crisis in each of our lives. So that was really important. that allowed me to mourn. That's something I never wanted to do. I tried a lot of different things, whether it was therapy. At one point I had PTSD. At one point, I was trying any kind of remedy that I could, whether it was medication or working with support groups or SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, those who had real similar experiences. And those were all helpful to some degree, but they were really more, I think, about just coping. The most helpful was when I participated in a program that dealt with the grieving, as well as meditation. It added a spiritual component. And that was really the most profound beginning of the transformation. As much as I know that I've gone through a tremendous process of reconstruction, and I would say even transformation, there are still layers of triggers that come up. And I know one of them clearly is when someone in authority misuses their role and pushes boundaries or disregards boundaries. The triggers are far fewer than ever, and when they do come up, particularly around boundaries and people misusing authority, I figure them out more quickly, and so that's been really helpful. But I've been really practicing reconnecting, staying integrated, and continuing on a spiritual path that is taking everything that I've experienced and making it more useful. An experience, I think, as a male is probably common with so many, in that there's so much to live up to be that Superman, to be invulnerable, to be able to protect anyone else, and to be super strong and competitive. And so when our own feelings come up, when our own pains come up, it's really difficult. And we're wrapped in so much shame just about having those. So I think people need to expect that men are going to be slow to trust, slow to come forward and be open about their brokenness. And people need to be able to contain that when it does come up, because it can come up in rage. It can come up with such a vengeance, kind of a bloodthirsty want to kill whoever's done harm to us. And that's so strong that people need to anticipate, be a safe container, have really good boundaries, be clear about their own authority, be real able to listen, be present, and not judge. And that's, I think, why male support groups are so important, especially in the beginning when people are so raw coming forward, that any kind of judgment that comes out can be so shaming, so re-traumatizing. So that's one. So be really patient, be really clear, and allow people by example. Speak up about our own woundedness. Allow people then to trust and to move forward in coming forward with their experience. I was a professor. My life has been in education. That's what I thought I was going to be doing with the rest of my life. And what I'm doing now, I'm committed to promoting healing and helping to end abuse wherever that is. And so I'm more of like a stem cell at this point, kind of creating materials and integrating spirituality with healing and trauma and doing a lot of things I never expected. So there are a lot of ways that I'm very different. I'm still a teacher. I'm still very passionate about helping to change the world in some way. But I never expected to be swimming in this ocean of trauma. And coming from a place where that's a really redeeming process, where I recognize that it's by engaging that we're really helping to change the world in a very profound way. So it's something that I never imagined that I would be doing, and it's something that also is helping me to be even more whole and healed. And it may seem like a smooth story at this point, but from the time when my experience came up in 2002 until now, it's been an incredibly terrifying journey. And so I guess I want to encourage people to stay with the process and say that not just that there's hope for healing, but there's a whole new level of living, of being a whole lot more alive and connected and purposeful, and that for me is all about spiritual life, and I don't mean religious life. So, but I've gone through, the losing my mind and being a victim and being a survivor and being, somehow in this in-between place, trying to figure out who am I, what do I want, what's my purpose. So now I'm a wounded healer, and I say that with a kind of humility that it means that we all continue to work with our experience to help other people, and I think this is where we all need to go.